just before the big start. Matthew Pinson, the umpire for this race, former teammate of James Cracknell, coach of Vesta. We've not spoken much about Sydney, but they will be showing their mark, and off they go.
Yeah, Vesta just pointing towards those boys. They're going to have to correct their steering here. Getting a little tangled on the boys there, and they're going to have a big overcorrection into the middle of the course. It's so tough, isn't it, with the steering foot? Normally that sits with the bow seat, so we've got in both crews the bow position steering the boat. But Vesta, as you said, coached by James Cracknell. I walked past him on the street this morning. Just going, oh, into the booms, into the booms.
Athletes quickly pulling the blade in, trying to push away from the boom so they can continue with the race, but I think Sydney are going to capitalize on that mistake by a big, big margin.
I think, unfortunately, this race is going to be all but over for Vesta. That is a huge margin because they weren't able to get off those booms quickly, I should say. As we get a replay now, you can see just the correction in the steering, pushing them back onto the buoys and then into the booms. Oh, devastating. You can see how hard they've hit. And they have to pull their oars in and physically push off the boom with the blades. Oh, devastation there on the face of the stroke seat, Christopher Hall.
The wooden booms do tend to be unforgiving, but that just shows so much excitement and adrenaline in these athletes. Off the start, they were so up for it and so ready to race. Sometimes steering can go slightly into the background over trying to accelerate your boat as fast as you can. But the athletes did get back up to the quick second start. They're absolutely sprinting, trying their best to catch up with Sydney, but is it a little bit too late? Is that Sydney crew a little bit too experienced, Sarah?
Yeah, look, I think that's a massive lead there that they've given away to the Sydney crew. I think this would have been a really, really tough battle, actually, in this row. I think it would have been hard to call, but certainly the coach, Franz Imfeld, would be reasonably happy about his crew not having to really exhaust themselves on the Wednesday. But Thomas Patrick, Charles Hine, Jackson Gersoy, Ambrose Hennessy, certainly they're here for one thing, and that's to make it through to Sunday.
Definitely, and they've been preparing so well all season. The crew carries a 6.14 erg average, which for a club Wyfold event is a fantastic contender to secure themselves a spot into the weekend. Their stroke seed is an under-19 junior world champion in the Coxed 4. That's Ambrose Hennessy. And actually that Sydney crew has 2 GB athletes in it also.
Yeah, we've got at least one British coach over at Sydney Rowing Club at the moment, as well as Franz Imfeld. So there's a couple of British coaches and then some British athletes that have been coming out and having a gap year or doing some rowing in Sydney. So the club's certainly benefiting from that. A couple of Joey's boys in the 2 and 3 seat, Charles Hine, Jackson Gersoy. 20 years of age, they finished in 2022.
You can see the close-up now on the Sydney crew. Despite what happened earlier, obviously to their opponents, they're still keeping very good level of technical composure. They're pushing hard, they're working for their win. They don't want any free handouts, they just want to have the best row possible and prepare for tomorrow. This is their first race in this event, so it's important to get that feeling in your legs.
Oh, we've got another angle of that hit on the booms. Wow, you can see how close they've come towards that. They're almost in too close to even be able to push out with their blades, aren't they? You could see one of them trying to reach out with his arm to push them off the booms there. I mean, that's going to be a recurring nightmare for the next 12 months for this crew.
I believe that's it. But sometimes that's the kind of motivation you need to return next year stronger and pick up a Henley win. And we've seen that happen so many times over and over. It's not new. It does happen every year. I mean, we do call Henley the wooden boxing ring just because of those two wooden rows of booms and then the athletes battling it out in the middle. So sometimes they do sting, but it does happen, and the crews and the athletes do tend to come back stronger and happier for it for the following year. And particularly off the start, it's tricky to get that steering right, because obviously even if you start on, despite if you start on Berkshire Station or on Buckinghamshire Station, you can't actually see the booms for the first 150 meters or so you kind of have to guess that line. And sometimes if you're also rowing and steering at the same time, particularly on stroke side, it must be so hard to judge that distance that your crewmates have to the booms.
Gosh, you feel for these guys. They're giving it everything, though. They're racing it down the course. We can see a bit of an overcorrection here from the steering again. They're just going to have to be careful here so they don't come a cropper on those booms again. But we saw out of the blocks, they just sort of blown over their bow towards the island, and it looked like they might head into those buoys, which they did. They then overcorrected and went into the centre of the course, overcorrected and went back into the booms. So really tough.
It all happens within a matter of about 10 strokes, so particularly as a rower being inside of the boat, having to execute a clean start, focus on your opposition, focus on course, focus on the race plan, and then steering. It just goes in a blink of a moment. So I feel a lot of compassion for the steersperson here.
But Sydney Rowing Club, they're basically just paddling down here over the course. Such a shame. It was such a good matchup. Would have been a really, really great race between these two boats. But at least for Sydney Rowing Club, they're able to get a run down the track, maybe conserve a little bit of energy, and we'll see who they draw tomorrow.
I'm sure they'll be out for a very, very good race here in the Wyfolds.
Confirmation in the Wyfold Challenge Cup, Sydney Rowing Club Australia defeating Vesta Rowing Club.